Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some feedback feels more impactful than others? Like, why does a simple thumbs up from a friend hit differently than a thumbs up from a stranger or even just an abstract shape? Well, this new study digs deep into that very question. Today we're exploring a fascinating study that tries to untangle what makes social feedback so powerful. Researchers noticed that in previous studies, when people got feedback that was both social and had a clear meaning like a thumbs up or down, they seemed to process it better, but they couldn't quite figure out if it was the social aspect itself, the meaning, or a combination of both that made the difference. So they designed this experiment to separate these things out. Think about it, we're constantly learning and adjusting based on feedback. If our actions are met with approval or disapproval, it shapes how we behave. And since we're social creatures, social cues often play a big role. Studies have shown that social feedback, like seeing a happy or sad face, can lead to better learning compared to non-social feedback. But the problem is, most of the social feedback we've studied, like smiley faces or thumbs up, are not just social, they also come with a lot of built-in meaning and familiarity. This makes it tricky to know if the socialness itself is the special ingredient or if it is the whole package deal of social plus meaning. This study wanted to pin down what is really going on. So, how do you even test this? The researchers brought in 42 healthy volunteers. They had them do a time estimation task. Basically, they had to guess how long 1 second was by pressing a button. After they made their guess, they'd get feedback. Now, here is the cool part. They used 3 different types of feedback. First, there was social familiar feedback, which was the classic thumbs up for good performance and thumbs down for bad. Second, they had social unfamiliar feedback, which were these weird made-up hand gestures that looked like they could be social but didn't have any pre-learned meaning. And third, they had non-social unfamiliar feedback, which were abstract shapes that also had no pre-learned meaning. The key here was to compare these different types of feedback. They used EEG, which measures brain activity, to see how people's brains reacted to each type of feedback. They looked at brain signals that happened very early on, within milliseconds of seeing the feedback, and then later signals that show more in-depth processing. The results were really interesting and honestly a bit surprising when it came to how accurately people estimated time. There wasn't a huge difference between the social unfamiliar gestures and the abstract shapes. However, they did find that performance was slightly better with the social familiar thumbs up and thumbs down. This suggests that the familiar, meaningful social cues might give a little behavioral boost. Now, for the brain activity, the early feedback evaluation signal, called the FRAN, which happens very quickly after feedback, actually showed the biggest difference between positive and negative feedback for the non-social unfamiliar shapes. For the social unfamiliar gestures, this early signal wasn't as good at telling apart good from bad feedback. It was only when they looked at the social familiar thumbs up and thumbs down that they saw a really clear distinction between positive and negative feedback in this early brain signal. And this distinction was even stronger than for the non-social shapes in some ways. This is a big clue. It suggests that the familiarity and the communicative meaning of the feedback is what really drives this early brain response. More so than just the fact that it is a social gesture. Moving to a later stage of processing, the P300 component, they found something different. Here, the social unfamiliar gestures actually had a smaller brain response when the feedback was negative compared to when it was positive. This was more pronounced than in the social familiar condition. This suggests that when social feedback doesn't have a clear meaning, people's brains are doing more work to figure out what it means, especially when it is negative. It's like the brain is saying, what is this strange hand signal, and what does it mean for me? And finally, they looked at frontal midline theta, or FM, which is thought to reflect cognitive control and how we adjust our behavior. This brain signal only showed a clear difference between positive and negative feedback for the social familiar thumbs up and thumbs down, for the unfamiliar social gestures and the abstract shapes. There was no such distinction. This is a really strong finding. It suggests that only feedback with established communicative meaning, like the thumbs up and down, was able to effectively engage the brain's control mechanisms needed for actual behavioral adaptation. So, what does all this mean? The big takeaway is that the idea of a simple social processing advantage might be too simple. This study provides strong evidence that it is not just the social nature of a stimulus that makes feedback powerful, but rather the combination of sociality and its well-learned communicative meaning. When social stimuli, like the unfamiliar hand gestures, lacked a pre-existing meaning, they didn't automatically lead to a processing advantage. In fact, they seem to require more cognitive effort, especially in the earlier stages of processing. The brain seemed to be working harder to figure out what these novel social signals meant. The researchers conclude that communicative meaning is the key. When we encounter a familiar social signal like a thumbs up, our brain already knows what it means, and this allows for efficient and impactful feedback processing, leading to better behavioral regulation. Sociality alone, without that shared meaning, doesn't seem to provide the same boost. It's like the shared language of gestures and symbols is what truly amplifies the impact of feedback. This suggests that when we think about social feedback, we should really focus on the shared understanding and meaning we have with others. This study is really strong because it was designed to carefully separate sociality from communicative meaning, which is something many previous studies struggled to do. They used a good mix of stimuli and measured brain activity at different points in time. However, they do point out a few limitations. For example, they didn't have a non-social familiar group, like traffic lights or plus-minus signs, which would have helped confirm if the familiarity advantage was purely social. Also, the social familiar feedback was always given last. So there might have been some practice effects influencing the behavioral results. But importantly, the comparison between the social unfamiliar gestures and the abstract shapes, where the block order was mixed, showed no significant behavioral difference, which really supports their main conclusion. This research is so important because it refines our understanding of what makes social interactions and feedback so influential. It moves beyond just saying social is better to saying social with shared meaning is better. This has huge implications for everything from education and parenting to marketing, and even how we design user interfaces. If you want your feedback to be truly effective, it needs to tap into a shared understanding. Think about how much more a personalized compliment from a trusted friend means compared to a generic one from a bot, even if the bot's message is functionally the same. The familiarity and established meaning are crucial. Future research could explore how much overlearning is needed for unfamiliar social stimuli to gain this power, and if this distinction holds true across different cultures and age groups. This study really highlights that communication isn't just about sending signals, it is about the shared meaning we attach to those signals. And that is a fundamental part of our social intelligence. If you found this breakdown interesting, please give this video a thumbs up. What are your thoughts on social feedback and its meaning? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more insights into the amazing world of psychology. We'll see you next time.